All right, introduction to the automatic transmission. Now this is a fun game, okay? So we're gonna identify these parts, but also I'm gonna use this. So if you look, this is an actual gear set right here. It's fully functional, so we can actually do a lot of our tests on this old game called the high gear game. So have a look at this. Can you see how this is the same? So we're gonna identify these parts right now. Who thinks they know what that center one is? Here it's yellow.
The sun gear.
The sun, not S-O-N, but S-U-N. Okay, I agree. So you're out. We're gonna pick somebody new. Anybody knows? We're gonna make this easy. How about this one? Blue right here.
The planetary.
Good guess, but not the right one. The ring. Who said that? Good job. Okay, so I'm gonna set this down, and then because the next one's a little bit confusing, so we're gonna make this one the ring because it is, and it would be the sun gear and the ring gear. But the confusing one is like this thing's pointing to a bunch of stuff, and this is where I feel people get confused. So on here I can show you. It's pointing to the orange part, but also the white parts. Those are all together. If we wanted to take this apart, we could. I'd take the sun off. And then if you look, this whole thing is called the carrier. See, so it's got the planets with it, but we a lot of times will just call that the planet carrier. Okay, makes sense? So these would be planet gears, or sometimes called pinions, but when we do this activity, we're just going to call it the carrier. So let's make that orange. Well, I used orange. It's green. Oh, I did something bad. I did a bad thing. We're going to call this the carrier. And this one, I wasn't really understanding where that was going right there. So mess that one up. This one would be the ring, which means Abdul, you were right. What is that? Exactly. So the planets and the carrier and this one are kind of separated. I actually missed that. That's not how you do it. Or we could do, how about pinion? On the ASE, they're more likely to call it a pinion. So like, for example, the ASE may say a transmission's being disassembled and a damaged planetary pinion has a broken tooth. What should be replaced? So like, let me demonstrate that. If one of these white teeth were broken, and you can see, like, let's say in this condition, you can see how that broken tooth is going to hit the other teeth, right? Right? So let's just say it's maybe this one. I just hit the ring gear with that tooth, and now I just hit the sun gear with that tooth. So what other teeth are going to be damaged? All of them. Right? Because if now I'm not going to give you another lesson in health class, but if this was STDs, if this one has the STD and then it contacts this one, now this one has the STD, but then all the way around it contacts this one, and then this is damaged, which eventually is going to contact that tooth, and this, it's all damaged. It's all just got to be quarantined. So if you're going to replace one gear, like one part, you replace both. You replace a ring gear, you're replacing pinions, the carrier, the sun, you're replacing it all, okay? Then the other critical thing with that's on the ASE is, I'm going to show you as we get a little bit more in, but if one of these is damaged, like let's say it's that tooth, in certain conditions, that tooth, like in this condition, that tooth would be making noise. You'd hear it. But if they're all turning together, you wouldn't hear it. And that's kind of weird, right? So we're going to make some gear ratios here. It'll be fun for you. So we got these ones filled out. You're happy? You like it? You love it. The next part, people get a little stuck on. So this is actually your transmission fundamentals worksheet. Here you go. I think you'll be able to see this. In fact, you guys in the back row might not, so I believe I could zoom in here. All right, so we want to focus on these things right here. So in the automatic transmission, we're always going to have a held member, a drive member, and a driven member. You understand what the held member is? We hold that. We just hold it. what do you think the drive member means? Yeah, exactly. So the drive would be like, that's what's getting the input from the engine. Kind of makes sense? So like if this was this one, this is the easiest one for me to show you is if I'm the engine crankshaft and I connect to the sun gear. This would become the driving member, because see, I'm actually turning this one. Whereas the driven member is different. The driven member is going to be being driven. Make sense? So the driven member, we connect that to the wheels, or the drive shaft, or if it's rear wheel drive, we're really going to connect it to the drive shaft. But if it's front wheel drive, we're going to actually connect that to the diff, the transaxle part of the differential part of the transaxle, which goes to the wheels, right? So the output, the driven member is always the output, and that always turns the wheels, makes the car move. Okay, so in this case, the held member is what? Can you see? That's the sun. So what that means, I need to hold this, right? This is the sun, right? Now what's the drive member? So if this is the drive member, I'm going to turn it like this, which means what is being driven? I'm turning the carrier, remember? I'm driving the carrier. So what's being driven? It's blue. Okay, it's definitely the ring gear. Now I need to back up, and this part's a little bit tricky, because what I've done, I've drawn some lines on here, so I'm going to try to show you on here, and then I'm going to show on the carrier, but I know you guys in the back row can't see. That's part of the reason we want to make the video. Right? So if I back this up to the right spot, I should be able to align some Sharpie marks. In fact, the Sharpie marks have faded after all the use. So look, we're going to make some Sharpie marks. You guys can see the blue one pretty well, right? But what we need to really see is the orange one. So this is going to be the carrier. You can see this mark I'm making. And then do you see the sun has a mark right there? Everybody see that the marks are lined up? Kind of? Okay, tell me again, what am I holding? The sun, right? Do I remember right? What's my input? What is my drive gear? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to hold my right hand on the sun. I'm going to turn the carrier like this, and you're going to watch the ring, and you're going to see, right now all these lines are lined up. What we need to know is the ring gear going the same direction or the opposite? And is it going faster or slower? In other words, that's what it's asking here. Is the speed increased or reduced? So first question, same direction or opposite? Same, that one's really easy, right? So if it's the same, we can go ahead and say direction is the same. Isn't that easy? Very good. Then, let's do this again. Now it's going to be a little more tough. You got to tell me, here's the lines lined up. Is it going faster or slower? Is it? Because look, I've only got the carrier turned to here, and isn't the ring gear somewhere around here? I can't see it, So if I keep going, I'm watching that ring gear in blue, right? See, the ring gear's already back up to the top. The ring gear's done a full revolution, and my carrier's only gone 3/4. So didn't it go faster? So here's the perspective. I'm going to set it down for a second. When my input is the drive member being the carrier, is my output member going faster or slower? The output was the ring. Didn't the ring go faster? Okay, so here you go. The speed was increased. So that's from the perspective of, let's make this a bicycle. Some of you have bicycles. Let's say you got a mountain bike. You get on the mountain bike, you pedal your feet. The question is the gear ratio going to make your rear wheel turn faster or slower? So if you're pedaling, like let's just say I'm pedaling like this, and I'm going that slow, don't you think the rear wheel would be going slower? Right? Look at how fast I pedal like this. But I'm barely moving. Have you guys ever done that on a bike? What gear are you in if you're doing that? Not the biggest. What do you call the gears? Like if you're in first, don't you pedal really fast? Right? But the bike doesn't go that fast? All right, fine. You don't like bikes? We'll do cars. Roberto, you're hired. Okay, so here's Roberto in his Integra, right? Boom, 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 ring, bing, pow, bing, bang, boom. He puts it in first. He takes off under the legal speed limit out of the parking lot. And you hear his RPMs, they're way up, right? But you look and you're like, oh, he's only going 8. That's because he's in first gear. Make sense? The purpose of first gear, as you can see, this was not an example of first gear, by the way, but generally speaking, first gear, we want to turn the engine really fast, but we want the wheels to turn really slow. Do you know why we want to do that? Why do you think? Because look at this last thing, torque. Torque is always going to be the opposite of the speed. So if we reduce the speed, like in first gear we'd actually do it different. We would reduce the speed to increase the torque to get the car moving. Okay, so we can manipulate these in different ways to get what we want. So if it's in the Integra, you want a lot of engine RPM and you want a little bit of wheel speed, so that way your wheels have a lot more torque. And the reason we put it in first is really mostly to get moving, right? So let's just say that you're at 10, you're coming up to a light, the light's red, but all of a sudden it turns green. If you're at 10 miles an hour, are you going to downshift into first, or what are you going to do? You could. So what are you going to do? You tell me. You want to downshift in first? Because it's probably not necessary. The time you really need first is if you're basically coming from a stop or like almost a stop, wouldn't you say? So when you're stopped in a car, you need a whole bunch of torque to get it moving. So the way the transmission is going to work is it's going to give us a whole lot of gear reduction, like a gear ratio that's going to get the car moving, but we can do that in an automatic with just the planetary gear set. That's kind of where the lesson's going. Okay, so do you guys understand how we came up with these? All right, let's just say, for you guys in the front, we're going to do this one. Marty, let's get a look at this. Here, and so you can all see too, this is the sun gear. This is an actual planetary gear set out of the transmission. This is the sun gear, can you tell? It's in the middle of the solar system. Okay. Then we have, what do you think this is?
Carrier planetary.
These are the planetaries, right? You can tell the planetaries are there, but can you see all the planets are carried? See, all these planets are on their own little axis pin right there, but they're carried in this white thing, so that's the carrier. And then last but not least, the ring gear is always like on the outside, perimeter, right? So if I take these and I pop these together, right? I want to get one good from the top looking down view. Sometimes it's a little tough to spline. All right, you can see sun, carrier, ring. Now I'm going to show you like this. Tell me what we just did on this one. I don't remember. I held the sun, and what did I turn? Okay, but it's hard for me to hold it, so I'm going to show you right here. If I hold the sun and I turn the carrier, and you look at what the ring is doing, see the ring is already around in a circle. The ring's completed its circle, but the carrier's only 3/4. If I turn the carrier 1 time, the ring is almost like 1.5. Okay, so just what I showed you on that game, this actual gear set will do the same thing. Okay, so sometimes we're not going to do every single one, so let's do 2. I don't want to give you all the answers. I want you to be able to watch this, but then come up with your own answers. Okay. So let's pick one. You want to do number 3 or number 4 or number 5? You pick. 4. Okay, I heard 4 first, so we're going with 4. All right, here you go. Once again, we got to look at the held member. So what's being held in this case? Okay, so what I have to do, I have to reach in and grab the carrier. You know there's nobody to do that in your transmission, right? So I'm going to do it this time because I need to. Let me line these lines up. All right, we got all these lines lined up now. So I'm holding the carrier. What's the drive member? I'll tell you what, to make this more simple, let's use some different terms, okay? The drive, how about we make it like this? We call this the input. And the driven is the output, okay? And so basically what I'm saying is the drive member is the engine and the output is the wheels. So here we go. What am I holding? Carrier. And what am I turning?
Sun.
The sun. Okay, ready for this? What can you tell me so far? Reverse. Okay. So if we look up here, what can we answer? Direction is opposite. Now here's where this one's a little bit tricky. When it's opposite, it's hard to tell if it's faster or slower, isn't it? So this is what I want to do. The lines are all lined up. I'm holding the carrier. I'm going to turn the sun, which is the input, 1 revolution. Ready? All right, the sun's back to the top. See the black mark? How far did the ring turn? Yeah, like it turned less, right? So at this point, we don't need to do the math. All we need to just do is say the speed. What was the speed? Reduced, which means the torque increased. You know what you just found in this carrier?
Reverse.
That's literally reverse. Reverse, remember you can't go that fast in reverse, right? So reverse is from a stop, so we want the gear ratio we want more torque, which means we're going to have the speed reduced and the torque increased, but we also need to be the other direction. So literally on this vehicle, we've made overdrive, forward, and we've made reverse, underdrive, which is true reverse. Okay? Now I'm not going to do all these because I don't want to give you all the answers. I don't want you to be cheating. But we can make a few more gear ratios right here. Let's just say, anybody give me a suggestion. You tell me what I'm going to hold, what I'm going to input. Give me something. Give me something. Come on, give me something. Renee, go ahead.
Is there any way to hold the pinion gear?
If you hold the pinion gear, you're really holding the carrier. So the planet pinions and the carrier, they're kind of like one thing. Yeah. All right, so come on, give me something. Hold the ring and turn. Okay, here we go. I'm holding the ring, I'm turning the sun. See my carrier? It's going same direction, right? Faster or slower? Here's the lines lined up. In fact, actually, I need to spin this. It's hard to line them back up once you've moved it, okay? Okay, all the lines are lined up. I'm holding the ring, is that right? And I'm turning the carrier or the sun, I forgot. Okay, holding the ring, turning the sun. Faster or slower? Definitely slower, huh? So what's that tell me? That would be speed is decreased, so the torque is increased. Guess what? That's like your first. You just made first gear. Congratulations. So on this gear set, I can make first, which is an underdrive. Underdrive meaning less wheel speed, but at more torque. Okay, that's how you do burnouts. That's how you get off the line. That's how you chain the 2 trucks up in the parking lot and you punch the gas and you drag the other truck around. You better be in first. It's not going to work in fourth. In fourth, you're going to get drug. You know, it's drug or be drug in the world. Okay, so let's just say if that was underdrive, right? Underdrive is like first. This can only make a 3-speed, by the way. Underdrive is first. Earlier we made overdrive. Do you remember how we made overdrive? I think we held the sun and turned the carrier. So look, if I do that, you see my ring gear is going really fast, right? So that's overdrive. Overdrive meaning like you get on the freeway and you want your engine RPMs down, but you want your wheel speeds turning really fast, so you can be at like 75 at 2,000 RPMs. So you can make first and you can make overdrive. What's in the middle? Renee, go ahead. Direct drive. In this case, we're going to call it direct drive. So there's underdrive, which is get going. Direct drive, which is kind of like, you know, like middle of the road. And then there's overdrive, which is freeway speed. The way you make direct drive, all you need to do is actually connect 2 of the components together. So I'm going to grab these 2 and turn them together. Look, it turns as an assembly. That's direct drive. Direct drive is 1-to-1 ratio. Whatever your engine turns, your transmission spits out the same exact speed. It doesn't mean your wheels turn that speed because we have a differential, and the differential is going to be like our final drive reduction. But in this case, if I lock 2, it turns together. Cool, so let's make first. Who remembers how to make first? We're holding ring, turning the sun. First, alright, direct, which in this case will make second. And then when we wanted to make overdrive, we did overdrive. And then let's say you wanted to do reverse. Reverse. That's crazy, huh? With one planetary gear set, you can have underdrive, direct drive, overdrive, and reverse, which is an underdrive. You could technically make two reverse if you wanted. Two reverse would be like this. We would turn the ring and look at how fast that sun's turning. That sun's actually in an overdrive. You don't get overdrive in reverse. You can't, you just don't have the talent. You don't need to be going that fast in reverse. All right, set that down for a second. Everything I just did is the same with this, so when you're doing these experiments, you can test it. So like how we found we made reverse, you gotta hold the carrier and you gotta turn the sun, right? See the red thing? It's going in reverse. That's our literal reverse gear. You can see the tape coming around. There's our reverse. We made first, I believe we held the ring and we turned the sun. There's our first, right? And then we also made overdrive, which I believe we held the sun. I don't remember actually how we made overdrive. I'm gonna figure it out real quick. Here you go. You can hold the ring, turn the carrier, and make the sun the output. There's your overdrive. So everything with that you can do on this. That's part of your assignment. Okay, feel good? Now let me help you button some stuff up for your understanding. We're gonna go to this page. You're going to answer all these questions. That's on you. Suckers. We're going to go to this page. This one really hurts people's brains. Would you guys agree? A couple people got to do this yesterday and you were struggling, huh? I saw you. There's smoke coming out. It's normal. All right, so if we look at this, we're just going to get right to here because we for now, I want to just disregard this is basically your drive position, but if you put it in second manual or low, this is old transmissions, it's only a 4-speed. I want to just ignore this. We're only going to focus on drive and above. Okay, for simplicity. So I want to point something out. If you look, can you tell this is the planetary gear set? Remember we labeled that, the sun gear, the carrier, the ring gear? Well, there's one and there's another one, and then there's another one. So you're kind of looking at three, but what's weird is, if you look at this right here, this is the sun, but like, why is the sun so long? It's the sun to two solar systems right there. So that's called a Simpson gear set. Some engineers, way smarter than me, okay, like I just need to I don't even... If you really want to know how I feel, this was a game that kids were playing in the 1950s when they were 6. What were you doing when you were 6? So, and now you wonder why, in World War II, we could actually go win something, defeat something. Okay? This is, kids were playing this game. This is like a 1950-something game. That's what we were doing. Okay. Now, those engineers back in the day were smart. Like this hadn't been really invented, and they figured out, oh, we'll do 2 gear sets, but we'll take a sun and we'll make the sun the common gear for both of them, and the sun will extend and be, it's just nuts the way that this stuff works. So for now, I just want you to understand, gear set with a common sun, that's Simpson. Then if you look down here, sun, carrier, ring gear. So this is a little bit more traditional, but you've got one Simpson, which is kind of a double, and then one traditional, and with those 3 planetary gear sets, we can make first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and reverse. And if we start adding gear sets, we can make a 6-speed, we can make an 8-speed. You want to make a 10-speed, no problem. You just keep adding planetary gear sets. Kind of make sense? So with one gear set, you can make underdrive, direct drive, and overdrive. But in a 4-speed, we need really underdrive, which is first, and then a little bit less underdrive, which is second. You can't do that with one gear set. You need to have a minimum of 2 gear sets, and to make all these gears, you need 2.5, kind of like 3. Cool? So with that being said, Let's describe what these are. So let's start with C1. So C1 right here explains clutch C1. So you know it's a clutch. What the heck does that mean? Well, I'm going to help you understand. This is a clutch right here. Okay. This is a clutch disc, and this is what we call a steel in the aftermarket, or in Toyota Service Manual they'll call this a flange, which they probably would call a frange, but it's spelled flange with an L. Okay, so if you take the clutches and you stack them up, and I've only grabbed a few. This is your multi-disc clutch. This is like a C1. This is a clutch. Now what's weird is you notice on these it has teeth on the inside. We're going to spline these to something. And then the steels, look, they're smooth on the inside. What do they have? Little lugs on the outside. So we're going to spline this to something else. Now I want to make just a general point. If we have this clutch pack and the clutches are splined to something and the steels are splined to something else, what happens if we activate this clutch and lock it up? Yeah, now those things spin together. Exactly. So maybe the most simple one is if we were to just elaborate on a brake. Clutches and brakes could look the same or they could look different. So like back in the day, this was a brake, but this is actually called a band. So at first glance, you might be like, oh, these are bands. A band could only do one thing. A band couldn't connect two spinning parts. It could connect one spinning part and like basically lock it, but this was pinned to the case. So this is pinned into the transmission or transaxle case, and it grabs a spinning thing. Like, let's just say that let's just say that carrier was spinning, and this band were to grab it. What would it be doing to it?
Holding it.
Holding, exactly. So now you guys got hold. By the way, sometimes they'll call that the reaction member, the reactionary. It's kind of weird. So if you look, this band can only function as a brake, okay? But bands, it's kind of fat and it takes up a lot of space. And like this is old school. They've mostly gotten rid of these. Now we would use a clutch, but the clutch specifically would be splined to the case. So if you ever see a pack of clutches and these are lugged into the case, you're like, oh, okay, that's definitely a brake. And that's why it's a B. It's not for band, it's just for brake. So if we apply B1, I don't even know what it's going to do. I just know it's going to take something that's going to break it to the case, which means it's going to be held. Okay. Cool? So let's discuss C1. Here's your C1. Do you see your C1 on this screen? Can you see it? Where's it at? All right, let's zoom in and let's zoom in, shall we? Okay. This is the input shaft. I cut that off, but this is going to be the in. So basically what I'm telling you is the engine spins this. Now if you want to get technical, the engine actually spins part of the torque converter, the impeller, and then a lot of fluid magic happens in a fluid coupling, and then technically the turbine actually spins the input shaft. But for simplicity's sake, the engine is turning the input shaft, your crankshaft, basically. Okay? So if this is the in, remember how we did that, where we were having an input, but we were calling it the drive? That's why I wanted to make it the input. Input's right here. Is the input connected to anything? If you look, there's a big gap right here. But then if you follow this line, it goes to C1. If C1 is not active, it doesn't make any connection. What that means is this clutch is just, it's got no pressure on it, it just slips. Makes sense? It just freewheels, just spins. When you actually engage C1, look what it does. It sends the input in, then it goes this way. Yes. It actually sends the torque here, and then what's it look like that's doing? It's kind of like going to this piece, wouldn't you say? So it's grabbing, can you tell what that is though? That's the ring. That's the ring right there, am I right? So when it goes to this piece, it grabs the ring, but what's it do? Does it stop it, or what happens there? It doesn't hold it. The clutch will grab, but exactly. So if this input shaft is spinning, and we clutch it to the ring, now the ring is spinning. See what I'm saying? So we literally send fluid to this clutch, it gets built up behind a piston, the piston squeezes the clutch, and now the two parts move as one. Make sense? So let's do that right here. The input is going to be my spinning hand. What did I just clutch up to? There you go. So see? Now I have a ring gear that's spinning. I'm not turning the sun. You see that, right? I'm not touching that. Makes sense? So that's really everything we did on that gear set is like, oh, reach in and grab it. You know there's no one inside that transmission to grab it, right? We can't grab it. We have to use a clutch to grab it. And then when we say hold it, you have to use a brake to hold it. But basically what we're doing, what we did right there with the game and stuff, we did what a transmission does. Cool, so does everybody understand what C1 does? Okay, well, we're going to elaborate a little bit more. So we're going to come back to C1, so keep that one in mind. Let's discuss what C2 does. Can you see it? Let's zoom for a second. C2 right here, clutch C2, so we know it's not a brake. C2 also goes to that input shaft, right? Can we agree?
Yes.
This is still the input shaft. So if C2, first off, you wouldn't really have C1 and C2 applied normally. So let's, in fact, yeah, we're good. So C2, what does C2 do? If C2 is active, it couples the input to, what does this look like? Exactly, that's the sun. Okay, so if C2 is active, right? First off, we'll review. If C1's active, I'm just, let's say we're holding the carrier, I don't know. This is C1. If you want to do C2, this is C2. See, they do different things. Coupling C1 does this. Coupling C2 does this. Kind of make sense? So we could do either one. Cool. Okay, so that's probably good for what the C does. We could just quickly talk C3, but just real briefly. So if you look on this chart, and this is a Toyota specific image, but all the transmissions work similar. If you look at C3, and then we try to find C3, it looks like actually C3 is kind of interesting. C3, all right, I'm definitely gonna trip you out. What the heck does C3 do? C3, okay, let's draw it like this. C3 goes, this is a sun, right? And it couples, isn't this the carrier? See, because it's going to one of the pinions, right, the planets? So it's the carrier. Is that it? But it also goes to the ring. Okay. I showed you something on this. We coupled what now? The sun got coupled to the carrier and also to the ring. So what is that going to give us an underdrive? Direct drive. Exactly. You apply C3, you're getting direct drive out of that rear, out of that final, that third gear set. Cool. So that's kind of a little unique the way that it does that, right? So just knowing the clutch can do any of those things, including give us that direct drive. Cool. Now let's focus on the B's. The B's, knees. B1, would you agree we have a B1? It says it right there. B1, you can see fairly simply. B1 looks different than the others. What is this? That's the case, huh? So if this is the case, and we apply B1, what are we doing? It's not the input shaft in this case, though. Because look, there's a break in it. You're close. It's just this. In the solar system, what's in the center? Exactly. So if you wanted to hold the sun, you would use what? What clutch? What brake? B1. Boom. Hold the sun. Do you recall what C1 did? Okay, C1 turned the ring. If we apply C1 and B1, that means B1 holds the sun, C1 turns the ring. See, we're making a gear right there. What is it? I think that's gonna be underdrive. See, so we just made underdrive. We didn't do it with reaching our hands in. We applied B1 and we applied C1. Cool? If I remember what B1 and C1 did. Okay, so let's do maybe one more break. Just find a spot. Kick somebody out. Grab one from the computer. Roll one from outside if you must. All right, how about, let's say, B4 is kind of interesting. B4 shows up a lot. All right, let's go find B4. Oh, look, there's B4. All right, so what does B4 do? It comes from the case. You noticing something? The brakes always go to the case, don't they? Renee, go ahead.
What's the case?
Housing,
Oh,
transmission, the big bada booty. You know, the Brandon Keys. You get grab a chair. You need a fancy chair. All right, so the case means literally these lugs are going to be going to the transmission case. So when you, like yesterday, some people were pulling stuff out of the transmissions. Some of these were slid into the case. You were literally pulling this out of the case. Those are brakes. If it's inside of a rotating and spinning drum, that's going to be more like a clutch. All right. So B4 goes from the case. And what's it doing here? Isn't that the sun? Yeah, so it's holding the sun. Right? Now, if you got that, you got to be wondering, what the heck is that? And anybody have any idea what F3 is going to be? All right, a one-way clutch is correct. So if you look, here are one-way clutches. We have F1, F2, and F3. Because we were right there, let's just go for F3. All right. A one-way clutch was the only thing I couldn't grab this one. We had a lot of parts out, so I got the band, I got the clutch, I got the planetary. We didn't have a one-way clutch, but I'll get one. What's different about the one-way clutch is the one-way clutch just does its thing. Like this clutch needs fluid pressure to hold. It needs something to control the fluid. It needs a piston. It needs the pump running. The one-way clutch, not so much. The one-way clutch is basically like a ratchet. So if you want to see a one-way clutch, I will present to you a kind of a one-way clutch. Proto Professional Tools, of which I'm not affiliated. So here you go, ready? That's freewheeling. So from your perspective, this is clockwise, right? What if I try to turn it counterclockwise? No. That's what one-way clutch does. That's it. Now, a ratchet has kind of a one-way clutch. We can reverse it. So these don't have a little lever, right? So you can only go the same direction. So what's kind of weird is the one-way clutch just does its thing. If the way that the transmission's trying to go goes against the one-way clutch will hold. So just how we want to hold, let's say, in this case, the sun, if it's in a condition where the sun is trying to turn counterclockwise, the one-way clutch is like, no, you ain't going, I'm holding you. But if it's in a condition where the sun is trying to turn clockwise, it lets it go. See what I'm saying? So it'll freewheel. So generally, the reason that we have that there is, let's say you're driving your car, right, and it goes first, second, third, fourth, and you're at fourth, and then like you see the light change and you let off. You ever notice it kind of coasts? We a lot of times want to use one-way clutches so you can have the coasting effect. But have you ever noticed, like, let's just say, let's even make it first. If you put it in drive and you're just going 5 and then you let off, a lot of times it'll coast. In some cars, it kind of does some engine braking. Let's say you were in drive, but it happened to be in first and you're going and it coasts a little bit. What if you pull the shifter into first, like low? Do you ever notice it drives different? Like you'll accelerate, it'll feel the same, but then you'll let off and it'll be like, boom, like what the heck? Why? That's why we have the ability to manually pull it into a lower gear. In the drive range, it may use the one-way clutch, which gives us the coast, but in the manual, if we pull it down manually, we might apply B4 to give us engine braking. That's why there's two. Some people would say, oh, this one's like the primary, but this one's a backup. It's not really a backup. This is for coasting, and this is for engine braking. And depending on what shifter position you're in, it'll give you one or the other. Makes sense? I'll even prove it to you a little bit later. Now, let's make a specific gear, shall we? You put your shifter in drive. Let's discuss what has to happen to make first. Shifter's in drive. You start to move, you're in first. What do we need to do? What has to happen? Well, let's outline everything that has to happen. To make first gear work. C1 is applied. Am I right? Do you remember what C1 does? C1 connects the input shaft to the ring gear. Okay? That's the first step. What else do we need to do for first? B4 is applied. So C1, where's B4? Right here. Okay? And then the one-way clutches. Do we have to do anything to those? It's more just saying, like, in first, F2 and F3 have to hold. We don't have to apply them. They're already there. They kind of work automatically like the ratchet. But we need F2 and F3 to be working for this to work. Cool? And there's your first. Make sense? So now you have the first gear. Now, I can't duplicate that, but I will duplicate that because we have one of these transmissions. And if you look at the transmission and you have the Simpson kind of double gear set and then the overdrive gear set, you can actually you can make first gear on that transmission. But we gotta pull one apart and we gotta build the whole gear train up, and then I'll demonstrate it for you. Okay, so that'll be part 2. Okay. Now, let's say you want second gear. First off, if you're in your Integra and you're like, and this Mustang's starting to pull away, and then you're near the red line, right? What do you need to do near the red line? Into second, clutch and shift, and the purpose of second is to give you more ability to go at a higher speed. So there you are, red line in first at 30. Motorcycle guys, that's funny, huh? That's how cars have to get a lot more gear reduction because they're bigger and they're heavier. Motorcycles, we don't need, like basically you could start a motorcycle in a gear ratio that would be third for a car. That's why motorcycles can do 80 or 90 in first. Because they're light, they don't need all that torque. Cool? Don't make that much anyway. So here you are. And you know you need to shift, so you're like second, it's going to give me more speed. Well, you got to come out of first to get second, right? So we're going to drop this stuff in first. How are we going from first to second? Can you see that? What do we do with C1? Leave it applied. So C1 doesn't have to release. What are we changing though? We're applying B2. B4 is still applied. We're now counting on F1, but we no longer count on F2, right? Because those are one-way clutches. So let's make a second gear. Let's make second gear be orange. So here is the second gear. So what changed? C1 is still applied. That's really easy. When you keep something the same, you don't have to have a control module do anything. You don't have to move fluid, nothing. Okay, B2, we need to apply that now. How are we going to do that? We're going to actually send hydraulic fluid down here. That's going to pump up the piston. The piston's going to squeeze the clutch. Boom. But this one's braking it, so it's a B. So let's lock it into the case. Cool. Good. And then B4 is the same. F1 now we're going to count on. So F1's got to do some stuff, which makes sense. B2 and F1 kind of do the same job. And then, what happened to F2? F2, we no longer really do anything with that. Now, F2 is a one-way clutch, so we don't have to turn it off. You just know that F2 is going to be locking like that ratchet, and now it's going to be unlocking. So, In first, F2 is preventing it. In second, it's like, fine, spin. Right? That's what one-way clutch does. And then, what else did we have to do? We keep F3 on, so this one's here. But, what the heck happened? Oh, and B4 is still on. Okay? So that's your change, now you're in second. You could do the same thing in third. We can do third pretty quick, okay, but I'm going to pick up the pace. So in third, what are we doing with C1? Keeping it on. All right, but what did we do here? We added C2. So now we have them both. Wait a minute. How can you have the input shaft turning both the ring and the sun? What's that make? Nelly, that's your cue. Your input shaft is turning the ring and the sun. Direct drive. Okay, so we had underdrive. Now we have direct drive. Do you see how we're getting like closer to the 1-to-1? Okay. Cool, but what else happens in third? We apply. This is saying it's active but not holding. That's what the triangle means. B4 is still applied. F3 is still applied. So all we really did is we no longer require F1. So F1 is no longer important. Did we have B2? B2 is no longer important. So now let's review. If this gear set's in direct drive, do you agree? It's in direct drive? Isn't this one already in direct drive? Because we had multiple things applied from what I recall. Did we? Or is it? What is going on back here? We have the sun locked down to the case. Do we have anything going to C3? Nope, we don't have anything to C3. So we're doing direct drive here, but we're not necessarily doing it here. Right? So we have B4 and F3. F3 is active. B4 is active. Still active. We didn't do anything with C3 yet. Okay, so it's just really direct drive. So what's interesting is you're going to get direct drive, which is a 1-to-1 ratio, and that's really important. Direct drive, every transmission has direct drive. In this particular one, when we get our direct drive, is in third. This is 1-to-1. So there's an actual mathematical calculation. If you were to turn the input shaft one time, how much is the output shaft going to turn? One time, but then it's still got to go through the differential, so it's going to get gear reduction ultimately to the wheels, but that's our 1-to-1. Now let's do fourth. You'll notice there's only really one big change. I'm running out of new colors, so we're going to make it blue again. Fourth, what did we do? We just add C3, didn't we? And other than that, we just drop B4. So if we add C3, where's that? Oh, look at this. C3 is going to lock that sun gear to the carrier and to the ring gear. So if this one's in direct drive and this one's in direct drive, that's actually how we get our overdrive in this book. So this would be overdrive. We call it OD. So there's gear reduction, less gear reduction, direct drive, overdrive. That's your whole entire 4-speed. This is like probably a A140 transaxle. So you see how we got all of our forward gears? But what happens when you want to back out of the parking spot? You don't care about all your forward gears. You only care about one gear. What gear is that? Okay, so you want to make reverse, do you? Let's see how you make reverse. You want to know how you make reverse? Let's go down here. Here you go. You're going to put in reverse. Reverse. We could actually even zoom up. We can actually scroll up and maybe zoom in. Nah, probably not. Probably won't work. So here's your reverse. To simplify it, I'll move it right to there. Reverse, what do you need to apply? C1? No.
C2.
C2? Yes. B3 and B4. Okay? Now let's see if that makes any sense. Okay? So in that gear set, what's our input? You tell me. We're back to this baby now. What's our input and how do you know? Our input shaft is going to C2, which means our input's going to the sun gear. I heard that. So here you go. Okay, and now if you look, we also applied B3, which is going to hold the carrier. Would you agree? B3 locks the carrier to the case, so the carrier is now held still, right? So the input being like this, and what's it look like when you're going to lock something to the case? You're going to hold it. You ready? You ready? You ready? Oh my goodness, it's reverse. Who would have guessed? That's how you make reverse. Make sense? So literally when you guys say, is this clutch for first? I don't know. If this is C1, it's whatever C1 does. C1 is used for first, second, third, and fourth, but not reverse. Make sense? So you can't think of it like, is this the first gear clutch? What actually Toyota would call this, when is C1 used? First, second, third, fourth. So what's that? All the forward gears. You know what they'll call it a lot of times? This is the forward clutch. Yeah. So if you jump in a car, you put it in drive, and it doesn't move. It's just zing, nothing, nothing. You put it in reverse, and it's like, I wonder if this got a problem with the forward clutch. It could be burnt up forward clutch discs because of high use, high miles and stuff. It could be hydraulic fluid is not building up behind the piston to squeeze the clutch. It could be, like the valve body is not sending the fluid. The piston's leaking all the fluid, right? But generally, you'd be like, oh, it's got a problem with the forward clutch. So when you pull the transaxle out and you pull it apart, looking like this, here's the forward clutch. How does it look? Where are the hydraulic passages for the forward clutch? Make sense? See how you don't just yank a transmission out and just like gut it and be like, what do I see? You already have to have some diagnosis. So now, y'all are gonna be dealer techs. You ain't gonna pull transmissions apart. So when you go to sell a transmission, what we just did together, that's how you be doing your diag. You don't do your diag by saying, well, I obviously need to pull the transmission apart and pull it, and then, no. Because you're not gonna sell 8 to 10 hours worth of labor to do a teardown and then tell them they're gonna replace it. You're gonna sell like 1 hour to pretty much get it figured out, which may mean checking codes, road testing. You may check fluid pressure. You may check the fluid. You may sniff the fluid. Remember? Oh, it smells like burnt clutches. Like that's all telling you it's going to be inside the transmission. If those tests pass and you find out it's got a code for a shift solenoid, and you find out that you look at the wire harness and a mouse chewed the shift solenoid, that's going to make it so you don't sell a transmission when it really needs a wire harness or a wire repair. Make sense? Nate, you had your hand up? Go ahead.
Is that charger the only ASE?
Yes, but slightly different. Andres?
On a forward group was a 2007 Tundra.
Yeah.
His shift solenoid went out.
Yeah.
He was shifting around.
Yeah.
And maybe a week after, his transmission went out.
Yeah. And that can happen too. It's probably higher miles. So like, there's a couple schools of thought. One, it's sort of like a harness. I personally would repair the harness, but then I'm taking the liability. But I'm good with that because that's where I came from. Then if you had a shift solenoid that's bad, I'd replace the shift solenoid because, again, that's kind of where I came from. But in the Toyota dealer, they're really worried about a comeback. So you're going to be like, you know what? We're not going to do a shift solenoid. We're going to sell you a transmission. So if there's a problem, that's under warranty. The dealer doesn't have to eat it. The tech doesn't have to do it again for free. It's just safer. It's not cheaper, though, but you got to understand your role. Not necessarily for ASE people, but for your role as Toyota techs, you're not the cheapest option. You're like the guaranteed fix that's like peace of mind. If I do a new transmission, I'm not worried about this other part failing in there because that sucker's under warranty for 3 years, 36,000 miles or more. You know what I'm saying? So for some people, they're going to say, well, take the $7,000 then, that's fine. Whereas for other people, they're going to be like, oh, if I can do a solenoid for $500, let me do that, and I'll just take tomorrow's problems as they come. It's different strokes for different folks. You got to know your role, though. Your role is the dealership way. Okay, but we're not done here. So let me just give you a hypothetical question based on what the ASE can say. We have a vehicle that comes in and all the gears work okay except for fourth. How are we going to break that down? All right, so let's troubleshoot fourth. What do we have in fourth? All right, Could C1 be the problem?
No.
Because that would take out third, second, and first. Could C2 be the problem?
No.
Because that would take out third and reverse.
C3.
C3 makes a lot of sense, but be thorough, see if there's anything else. And in this case, I'd say no. So if you have a car that came in with no fourth, I'd be like, yeah, we're after clutch, forward clutch, or clutch C3. Make sense? That's ASE concept right there, all day long. Actually, I really like Toyota, I gotta tell you. I didn't, but I do. This image right here, if you look at this image, you're like, what the heck is going on? But let's explain to you. What is C3 and what does it do? This will not be on ASE, this will be on ASE. It'll just be, more universal. It'll be like a basic chart. The concept is identical. So we talked about C3. If we thought C3 was bad, let me scroll down so we can remember. What is C3? C3 is the clutch, and it connects the sun to the carrier and the ring. Okay, so that means we're going to the back of the transaxle, and we're looking inside this drum that connects the sun to the carrier and the ring, and we're looking at it, right? So if this one can't lock up, this is the overdrive clutch. Okay, that's its name. The overdrive clutch is only active, I gotta scroll down just a little bit, in fourth, which is overdrive. So see, Toyota makes sense. At least they made more sense back then. This was a simple transaxle. I like to teach on this one because you can understand it. If I were to throw up the UB80, you could get it, but there's a lot more stuff happening. So that's why we're using a 4-speed, even though this transmission's like 30 years old. Okay? So it makes sense that C3 being bad would cause you to lose overdrive because it's the overdrive clutch. Cool? First, second, third work, fourth doesn't. Makes a lot of sense. All right, that's the type of diag you're going to see. Now, Renee, I saw your hand.
The C1 and C2 clutches look different physically?
On this one, they could look a little bit different. They're always going to look like this, but a clutch that has to hold more load, like for example, C1 is engaged in first, so that's going to be a beefy clutch. That might have 5 frictions and 5 steels. Whereas let's say the overdrive clutch, C3, that's only active in overdrive. The engine doesn't make that much torque in overdrive, so it can be a little smaller. Maybe you'll have 3 or 4 discs. They might actually be physically smaller. That depends on the size of the parts. So yeah, but otherwise it's going to be the same. Friction, steel, friction, you're looking. You can also measure these. Sometimes you're looking at them like tread depth, like they have little grooves, and are the grooves low? Like my grooves are low upstairs. Bald tires kind of. Other times you got to actually measure it like this and tell if it's worn. Then if it's worn, this is one thing, so this would be mostly where we end. If it's worn, you have to understand something. You have to figure out, is it the cause or the effect? The clutch is worn. Good job. You found it. Why is it worn? If it's got 150,000 miles, it's probably normal wear. But if it's got 10,000 miles since the rebuild, that would be worn prematurely. So why would a clutch wear prematurely? Something we talked about yesterday. This clutch will wear prematurely if it's slipping all the time. It's like you give a new driver a manual transmission, they're going to probably waste that clutch because they're going to let the clutch out, but it's going to be kind of going too fast, so they're going to push it back in. It's going to be riding the clutch. Anytime a clutch is slipping, it's wearing. If you want to make your manual transmission clutch last longer, let the stupid clutch out and that's it. Just let it out. Only push it in when you need to and let it out when you can. Don't be riding it, don't be clutching all the time. The more you clutch it, the more it slips, the more it wears. Make sense? Same with the automatic. So if it's slipping because of a hydraulic leak, it's supposed to get 150 psi at that piston, and that piston has 10 inches of surface area, so next thing you know, 150 is more like 1500 psi, but it's got a leak, it's not squeezing that hard because a leaking seal, it'll slip, right? So the worn clutch could be because of a leaking seal. It could be because of a leaking hydraulic circuit. It could be, it might actually be because some of these flanges are actually thick, sizable. They're adjustable thicknesses. If this flange, one of them can be thicker or thinner. If this flange is too thin, there will be a lot of play in that clutch. That clutch will actually apply a little slower and it'll slip a little more, right? So That's the ASE's goal. The ASE's goal is so that if you're certified, you don't just go in and be like, oh, the clutch is worn, slap a clutch in it. You should be able to know that clutch is worn prematurely. I have to check these other things and be able to theorize what would cause that to wear prematurely, and that's sort of where we're going, but a little more in hydraulic systems, okay? Now, Marty hip pause. You hungry?
So you want to start taking them out?
All right, so here's day one of transmissions. So your lecture will be before this, but this group, for example, let's listen to some crazy music, dude. All right. But you guys are getting pretty close. So why is this so stable?
Because of the two mounts on top.
Okay, so you're good on these two mounts. Your subframe is out.
Indeed.
Now, once you get to a little bit closer though, you'll post jack this. And that's actually what this group over here is doing. So they have the post jack here. That's gonna hold up the engine so when you split the transaxle off that side, the engine doesn't fall down and crush you. Now those mounts we were talking about, there's one mount, there's the other mount, and they're both going to the body, and that's why they're able to just yank the subframes. Like the old ones we had to put the support bar, but the new ones you don't. Alright, so that's the R&R stuff. There's quite a bit of a lesson there. Axles and steering shafts and stuff. The other and probably more critical part is going to be what we're doing on the overhaul. So let me show you what we got here. All right, so hey, you guys figured it out, huh?
Yeah, we're looking at everything.
Okay, so here's your clutches. Now you can see what clutch is what, right? So there's the number 2.
Oh, this is for the
There's the number 1.
differential.
Okay, so there you go.
Okay. Yeah, we're looking at
So there you go. So if you look right here, now when you're doing this disassembly, I know you can just rip it apart and slam it together, but I want you to look at something. See that number 2 brake disc? I want to see if you can locate that. And then when you locate it, we're going to take it a step further and actually see what it does and which gears it's active, okay? So, in fact, you can pick one. Pick any one of these. You want to do the number 2 disc? You want to do, okay.
this is all
Way down in the bottom, right here. Okay.
so we're gonna do the oil pump one, which is
Okay, go up to the top.
okay.
Okay, so here's your oil pump. The number 1 looks like it's the first, right?
Inside.
The deepest.
Yeah.
So the number 1 would be down here, right? Right there. So that one is the number 1. Okay, C1. You look up C1. I might have a clue, but I want you to look up C1. You've located C1, but I want you to look up what C1 does to the gear set. That's probably on new car features, okay? You're going to see a diagram, and it's going to show you the transaxle and like some lines and stuff. Jimmy's already on it. He's looking it up, huh? Am I right? Okay, so that's the U760. We could also use the UB80s. So the U760s and 660s are here. The AB60s are here. And then the UB80s or the UA80s are going to be here. So you might use one, you might use the other. You're going to do at least 2. Front wheel drives, rear wheel drives. And we use these benches. Those benches are for the other class on the other side. Okay, so did you figure out what that is down there? All right. All right, so you're touching it. It looks to me like a Planet carrier, huh? That's a Planet carrier, but they might have a specific name for that carrier. Oh, TIS has crashed again, huh? Oh, no. You can go on EduRoam and put your information in. It'll work. All right, now these guys. You figured something out, so don't give them any answers, but you got a set of clutches right there, right? Which ones are they? You knew the name. Right. Didn't you guys tell me that was yeah. It's all right. Now we can let them find out the answer. That's B3. So B3, you know because you follow TIS. You look. Oh, is that one B3?
This one's B3.
Oh, okay. So if we're talking about that one, B3. All right, so there you can see B3. You can see where it's located in this rear-wheel drive UB. This, what the heck is this thing? It's a AB60E. Okay, so let's just say you had a reason to believe your B3, brake number 3, has a problem. What we're looking for, we're pulling this apart and we're looking at these clutches. We're looking for wear. Sometimes it'll give you like a tread depth, kind of like a tire, like 30 seconds. Or other times you'll actually measure the thickness of the disc itself. A lot of times you can look and just see. These don't look bad. We're also, I'm going to set it down look just this way so we're organized. We're also looking at, is there any evidence of slipping or burning on here? This clutch is definitely not burned. So if your diagnosis was a bad B3 clutch, and you took this apart, you'd be like, uh-oh, it's not a B3. That means there's something else wrong, so you better find something else wrong, such as maybe a hydraulic issue. So if you had a hydraulic issue in the valve body and it wasn't getting full pressure to B3, that would make B3 slip. It'd probably end up showing burn anyway. But right, so I want you to identify what the parts are and sort of like what they do and what would happen if that were to fail. So now here's your next assignment. B3 is used in certain gears. And we went over how to find it, but I want you to find it for this AB60E. What gears is B3 used in? So in other words, if B3 was no good, what would the customer's concern be? You guys kind of figuring it out? Similar? All right. Your assignment's the same. So if you found B3, it's a pain, right? It's actually easier to find out what it is sort of while it's still together and then keep track of it. So let's say you're on B3. Matter of fact, let me give you a different one. How about that? Just for fun. We got a group doing C1. They're doing B3. How about you go after C2? There's a thing in new car features where you can see a whole diagram of not just how the transmission looks, but what gear sets it grabs and what it does to it. And you're going to find that, and then let's talk about what C2 does and what the symptoms would be if it was C2. And yeah, you're going to write all over here. No, that's totally fine. Okay? Good. Here we go. All right, let me take a look. Let me explain, and let's see if you guys agree with me. So here you go. I keep forgetting it's not touchscreen. Here's your diagram. You guys see C1. Okay, so here's C1. Looks to me, C1 is connecting. What do you think that middle thing is right there? That's a part of the gear set. You remember the gear set? It's got a sun gear, a carrier, and a ring gear. What does it look like C1's touching right there? Right there. What is that round thing?
The rear sun gear?
I think that's the sun, yeah, exactly. And it comes over and it connects it to this thing, the intermediate shaft. And see, and the intermediate shaft looks like ultimately it's going to the input shaft. All right, so now if you figure out what that means, if you want the input shaft to be, if you want the basically the input shaft to be connected to the sun gear, you'd have to activate C1. Do you see how this diagram tells you that? That one's kind of complicated. Let's go with how about B3? It's a B because it's a brake, right? Brakes always break stuff to the case. In other words, it stops it from spinning. So B3 is going to be splined to the case. If we were to activate B3, see how it's pointing right here to this thing? What would you say that thing is? It's the outside gear. What do we call that?
The planetary gear?
The planetary is actually more like where B1's pointing. This is all the way on the outside. What's on the outside? Do you remember? Jimmy, you remember? What's the gear on the outside? On a planetary gear set. Sun gear's in the middle. Then there's the carrier. And then on the outside, there's one more thing. It starts with an R. The ring gear. Okay, so if B3, I can't fault you because you haven't had the lecture. I'm making the lecture now. B3 grabs the ring gear and breaks it to the case. It stops it. Make sense? So if you understand that, then what's B1 do? Yeah, but look, it's not going to there. Look what it's doing. It looks like B1 is going through the carrier. Oh, through the carrier, right? Let's just say we stop at the carrier. B1 breaks the carrier. See how that's a planet? In the middle is a planet, right? So the sun's in the middle. The planets go around the sun. That B1 is going to a planet. So B1 is going to grab the planet and break it to the case, but the planet's carried by the planet carrier. So that would hold the carrier. Cool. And then what's kind of weird is it also goes to the sun, which is like, I think that's the intermediate sun gear. So that part's a little bit weird. Oh, it's actually the front sun gear. And that's just because this has, I think this is a Ravino gear set. So that tells you what the clutches do. But that's not enough. Let's just say, we were talking about which one before, C1, right?
C1.
Okay, so if you thought C1 was messed up, now you know where C1's located. You can go put eyes on it. You can tell, okay, C1 grabs the sun gear and it attaches it to the intermediate shaft, okay? That's what we were saying. But C1, oh, and there you go. That gives you the description right there. Connects intermediate shaft and Ravino planetary rear sun gear. You were exactly right. Good work. So C1, you have to find it on here. Can you guys see C1 right there? When is C1 active? Can you tell?
First through fourth.
First through fourth. Interesting. Did C1 have another name? No, they just call it the number one clutch. Sometimes they'll call it a forward clutch, but in this case, so C1, if C1 was bad, which gears would be affected? Exactly. So let's say a customer came in and their transmission slips first, right? First, second, third, and fourth slip, but fifth is fine and sixth is fine. Now you'd be like, oh, based on my chart, I expect it to be C1, and then based on this, I would know that the sun gear is not being locked to the intermediate shaft, and then you would dig it out and you'd find C1, and what would you look at on the actual clutch? Right? So like when you have this out, what you got to notice is these splines right here are going to grab something, and if those discs are worn, like these guys still have some of theirs apart. Wait, I'm just going to borrow this, okay? I'll be right back. If this was your C1 and you thought that C1 was the problem based on your diagnosis, you'd be looking to see if it looks like it's burned or slipping, right? And these all look like they're in pretty good shape, but a lot of times you'd find this would be burned and you'd be like, yeah, that's why first through fourth doesn't work. So if you have first through fourth slipping, it's pretty believable that it's going to be C1. Makes sense? You're not totally guessing. You may never actually go and put hands on this at the dealer, though. You'd be like, yeah, it's going to be C1. Now, if this was burned and slipping and all this clutch material came off, where does it go?
Fluid.
In the fluid. So if you check your fluid and your fluid's dark and stinky, it smells like smell. Ooh, it smells. So then you know that's nasty. Then you'd be like, oh yeah, it's just further confirmation that C1's burnt. See what I'm saying? You want to pick any other ones for fun? All right, so here's the follow-up question. We were talking about when we hit, basically, here we are in third, right? Third has C1 applied. It has all these applied, by the way. It has. These are the solenoids. SL is on, SL1 is on, so that'd be more electrical faults. SL4 is on. But for the mechanical, we have C1 and B3. That was not first, though. Sorry, for first gear, we have C1 and we have F1, all right? If it was only first gear that was having a problem, don't you think it could be F1? Right, because F1 is only used in first. So that would be a one-way clutch. We can find a one-way clutch real quick.
This thing.
Yeah, hold this, turn this way. Okay, now turn it the other way. You can't, can you? Turn it that way? Yeah, turn it that way? No. Okay, that's your one-way clutch. If you thought your one-way clutch was bad, that's what you do. You'd go to inspect it. Now, the thing is, you're not that strong, no offense. I'm not that strong either. You know what would be the strongest way to test that fine piece of equipment? Road test. So when you jump in the car and you go drive it, and you find out that this was one-way clutch. What was the number of this one?
F1.
F1. Okay, and F1's only in first, right? So if first gear slips, but second gear's good, you already diagnosed it as F1. You can say, like, F1 is failed. the road test is going to put a lot more force on this than you. But still, if you try to spin it and it spins both ways, you can confirm F1's bad. If F1's marginally bad, you may not be able to spin it. You may need to, like, you know, get stronger, or road test a piece of crap. All right, so that would be if there was a first problem. So when we go from first to second, let's have a peek. First gear. Okay, so F1 is probably still engaged, but we no longer need it. We add B1 in there, right? So you could locate B1. So second gear is C1 plus B1. If B1 was bad, what gear would be affected? Can you tell?
Second.
Just second. So if second has a problem, it could be B1. If second has a problem, couldn't it be C1? But then wouldn't it have a problem in first too?
Yeah.
See, C1 would affect first, second, third, and fourth. Whereas F1 would affect first, B1 would affect second, B3 would actually affect third, but does it affect another gear?
Yes.
Which one?
Fifth.
Fifth. Okay, so if B3 was messed up, you'd expect to have a problem in third and fifth, and then you'd be like, yeah, I know we got a bad B3 clutch. Let me go locate the B3 clutch, and the B3 clutch is right there, and then you'd go and find it in the service manual procedure, and then you go put eyes on it. Cool? Now, you were saying when it goes from third, when it goes from, we'll go with third. Third is C1. Fourth keeps C1, but adds C2. Make sense? So it needs both. It needs C1 and C2. If you had a bad C2, what gears would be affected? Can you tell?
Fourth or sixth.
Fourth, fifth, and sixth, exactly. Yeah. So you can do a lot of your diagnosis right from this chart. What if we had second gear and sixth gear in up or slipping or something?
B1.
Yeah, you see that B1's in second and in sixth. Okay, so you do a lot of your diagnosis right here. Then you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure I have a bad C1. Then you actually locate what C1 does. And then you can look up on the other page, like you got service info still pulled up? All right, so in service info, you got number one brake right here, so you can see where it is. We were trying to look up C1, right? So you just go down until you find where C1 is at. You're going to be disassembling in order. There's number two brake, so that's B2. We knew it was in the pump, so actually it's probably in the beginning. Right, we found that C1, I think, was pretty early on. There's number one. Oh, those are brakes. Didn't we find C1 on this? I don't remember. There we go. So number one clutch disc is C1. So there's your C1, and it's showing you where C1 is. So C1 was further down. Right, you can tell where that's at. Cool, you hear these guys are really excited. Right, so if you follow that type of diagnosis, you should be able to go to this and find out what part is actually burned or bad. Or like if the more these clutches get worn, the more end play they end up with too. So they'd actually be loose, they wouldn't squeeze as much. Cool? Good enough for a basic? All right, follow-up question. So everything we said is true, but the question was, like, let's say we wanted to test that one-way clutch. You can test it on the road test. Here's how you test it on the road test. You put it in drive. It starts off in first. You drive it. If first gear is strong, it's not slipping,